A video I wasn't expecting to make. I've missed an important rule which applies when using artillery. Making an attack basically from 1915 onwards. That you've got to use a certain amount of artillery, which gradually increases the further into the war you get, and if you don't, there's a penalty. So this idea is basically that you've got a solid defence. It depends on how many units are actually in an entrenchment. That you need sufficient artillery to overwhelm that, and if you don't, you suffer an insufficient artillery penalty. Now, what I was doing is I wasn't using artillery at all, to be quite honest, because there was insufficient supply, and there's still insufficient supply everywhere. Everyone's desperate for ammunition supplies, and because when you're attacking, you can get 4 strength points of infantry in an attack. Full strength for 1 supply point, yet it costs double that in supply points for artillery. I was tending to say, well, there's no point using artillery in attack, and it didn't really affect the defenders much because they were also short of supply. So the net effect of this is it's given a bonus to the attackers, but I think since the Austro-Hungary, Germany, Bulgaria have been attacking in the east, whereas the Allies have been attacking in the west, it sort of balances itself out. There's no way I'm going to try and do anything about it at this stage. We're going to apply the solid defence, insufficient artillery rules, etc. from now on. The other thing to remember, there are quite a few other little trench rules that you might miss. There's what you call stiffened defences, where you can basically, as the war goes on, it becomes easier and easier to defend terrain with a -3 movement penalty, and then it moves up to a -2 movement penalty, so it gets a lot harder to make headway against units in that terrain. There's another rule that's worth looking at, which is overwhelming artillery, which is something you can use in 1915 only, and that means if you've got sufficient attacking artillery units, that's siege and normal. Just remember that siege can be used as normal artillery from 1915 onwards anyway, that you can actually completely negate the trench in those situations, but that only applies to 1915. There are other rules that come in 1915 which are worth noting, that trench markers aren't removed when a unit abandons them or an enemy unit advances into them. They get replaced with like devastation markers. And the devastation marker has a movement penalty applicable to it, and that just shows how difficult it was to advance into terrain that had been completely smashed to pieces with artillery and etc. So yeah, I needed to be aware of that. It's a bit annoying that I didn't pick up on insufficient artillery and solid defence, but I don't think it's really had a detrimental effect on the game. I think it's swings and roundabouts. Central Powers have benefited in the east, whereas the Entente have benefited in the west.